Hey YouTube, it's been a while since I've done a video. This video is actually an update to a video I did 4 years ago that was called All Things That Are Important. I made that video on 9 June of 2020. And I've not really made too many videos where I just talk and speak my mind. And typically I was driving. I was going to drive today, but it's kind of rainy and yucky out, so I just decided to stay home and do it from the house. But I spoke about a lot of things on that video. I'd recommend, if you haven't watched that video, again, the title is All Things That Are Important, that I made on 9 June. I think it says posted 4 years ago. I'm wearing an orange shirt and I'm driving in my car, and it's a drive and talk. And I talked about a lot of things. I just kind of wanted to update everybody on what I actually have done since the 4 years ago when I made that video. I've done quite a few things. I've made some progress in some areas and not so much progress in others. But one of the first things I spoke about, I'd recommend you watch that video before you watch this one, because you may have no idea what I'm talking about. So I understand if you want to do that. But one of the first things I spoke about in that video was executive orders. Not from the federal government, not from the president. I'm talking about your state executive orders, which are issued by your governor, your state's governor. The one I was referencing 4 years ago was Executive Order 63, which was signed by our Governor Ralph Northam at the time. And he decided to do a lockdown. And I think it was from like 8 p.m. in the evening till 6 o'clock in the morning. He just wanted everybody just to stay in their homes. Well, I've done a lot of research since then. And I actually looked up in our state's constitution, Constitution of Virginia in my case, the powers delegated to the governor. And it's very striking and remarkable when you actually read that document. I recommend highly that everybody get a copy of your state's constitution. You can get them online. I know Virginia, our General Assembly, our legislative body, has what they call a LIS, which is a legal information system that they maintain. And it's got in text format. It's not original documents or anything, but it's current. It stays updated with all the state codes. It's even got a copy of charters. If a municipality has a charter on file, they've got copies of that. They've got copies of the Constitution. Any amendments that are made or any changes that are done to the Constitution, it stays up to date. The legislature takes care of that. It's one of the things they're tasked with doing. So your state probably has that as well. But read your state constitution. It's going to be very remarkable what you find out, what you discover. And one of the things I discovered right away when I was reading through the article that has to do with our executive branch, which the governor is the head of the executive branch. All 50 states and the federal government have 3 branches of government. The legislative, who makes laws, the executive, who enforces the laws, and the judicial, which interprets and does what the judicial system does. Those are the 3 branches. That's it. That's all that the people authorized the government to be, was those 3 branches. And they are all to be separate and distinct, and that's in our Constitution as well. But reading through the Virginia Constitution, under the executive branch and the authorities that the people granted to the executive branch, only extends to the executive branch. It extends to the bureaus that they create, the agencies that they create, the offices that they create, the office holders or the officers appointed or elected to those places, and the employees that are employed by the executive. That's the extent of his power. He has no power over the people. The people, and this goes along with the federal Constitution as well, and I want people to very, very much so understand this, because it is true. You will find this out yourself when you look. I encourage you to do so. But The people didn't grant power to government to control the people. The people did not grant power to another entity to control them. The people are sovereign. We are the sovereign people. Now, we can go get a license of some sort where we're exercising some kind of a privilege. Then, yeah, that stuff can be controlled. If you have a business license or you have a liquor license or you have any other license that's granted by the government, then there's certain stipulations that come with exercising privileges. Privileges can be administered and maintained, and there can be rules associated with it. There can be obligations associated with it. There are no obligations or rules for the people, except there's a couple exceptions there. The people are not supposed to hurt each other. Okay, that's a crime when you hurt somebody. That's assault or murder or whatever degree to which you hurt them. That is punishable, and that's where the executive branch comes in and goes ahead and applies through the judicial department to get an arrest warrant. If somebody comes in and signs an affidavit saying that you hurt them, now someone's got a claim on you. You can be subject to the law then because you did something you weren't supposed to do. Another example, well, that's the same with someone's property. If you harm them or their property and they can prove it and they sign an affidavit saying that you did this, made this claim, then you're going to have to answer for yourself. You're going to have to defend yourself, which we're all entitled to the due process of law. It has to be followed. It can't be, it's a right. It's a right given by our Creator. Our government didn't give us the right of due process of law. We obtained it through our creation, not through government. Government didn't give us our rights, and government can't take them away. We can contract them away if we want. We can sign into a binding contract with an entity, and then we have to abide by the terms of what we agreed to. So, but if you don't have any contract with anybody, you're not under a license, a privilege, a business, whatever, a license or permission or a permit. There are no restrictions other than hurt no one or their property. That's it. If you don't do that, you're not subject to the laws. If you're just a Joe Schmo like me and probably 99% of the other people out there that are just earning a living and raising their family and maintaining their property and their home, just, going to the store, growing my own food, distilling my own water. I don't bother anybody. I don't hassle anybody. I don't have any beef with anybody. And I don't expect the same in return. I don't wish to be beefed with anybody. I don't wish to have a problem with anybody. So that's where the executive power ends, is with the executive department of government. If you're not an executive department employee or a contractor or have a connection with your executive branch of your state government, and it would apply to the feds too, their power doesn't extend to the people in general. I want everybody to keep that in their mind. So whatever it says on that executive order and you read it and it's confusing if you don't know where the power ends, where it begins, who gave it to them, and the important part, where that power or authority ends. It ends with all of the property that was purchased by the executive department, the businesses, the offices, the cars, whatever property they own. They're in complete control of because they own it. And the people, to an extent, because they're working there under a contractual obligation. Or, there's some sort of a contract involved where, those people agree to be compensated and, they have to follow all the rules. Well, the head rulemaker is your governor. So if you work for the judicial department, the governor's got no say over the judicial department. Remember, all three branches of government are distinct and separate. The governor has no control over the judicial department, over the legislature or the judicial. Now, the only tie he has with the legislature is he has to sign all bills and acts that are approved by our legislative branch. If he doesn't sign them, he doesn't have to sign them to become law. The way Virginia works, The House of Delegates, which is like the House of Representatives. Virginia calls it something House of Delegates for some reason. I haven't quite figured out how that word came about, but it's the House of Representatives. And they have a Senate. Those are the two bodies in the legislative branch. They get together and they decide they want to come up with a law. And the House, the House and the Senate pass it back and forth till they all agree on it. And then they send it up to the governor, the executive branch. Well, the governor has to sign it in order for it to become effective in the state, or in my case, the Commonwealth. Well, the governor actually doesn't have to sign it. If he doesn't like it, he can send it back down for amendments. He can sit on it. He can not sign it. And if you get, I think in Virginia, if you get 3/4 or I think it's a vast majority of the House and the Senate to approve it, they don't need his signature. The legislature can pass it without his signature if they have a large majority of both the delegates and the Senate approve it. So they can force a bill through without the executive branch concurrence. So that's executive orders in a nutshell. And that's basically how your three branches of government are set up. They only have power over the things that they create, and their employees, their officers, their agents, their agencies, their property that they purchased. That's all the authority they have. And same with also too, all of your police power in your state comes under the executive branch. Law enforcement is part of the executive branch of government. The courts and all that are part of the judicial branch. And the legislatures, obviously, are part of your legislative branch. So that's how it works. I'm pretty sure your state is going to be identical with its own characteristics, but it all has to comport with the federal Constitution, which is a whole nother story. The next thing I talked about was the Virginia Beach Charter. Not all cities or municipalities have a charter. Some are by statute through the legislature. So it doesn't have to have a charter, but it does have to follow the legislature if it doesn't. Virginia Beach happens to have a charter, and I spoke a little bit about this in my video 4 years ago, and I was correct. Our charter started January 1st, 1963, when the then county of Princess Anne merged with the city of Virginia Beach. The county of Princess Anne was dissolved, and it now became the city of Virginia Beach, making Virginia Beach a city of the first class, which means it has over a certain amount of people living in it. A certain amount of voters, a certain amount of whatever. There's a certain amount of people live in it. And they determine that by the census, the 10-year census. So, and it says something very interesting, that all the inhabitants became part of the body politic. Well, what a lot of people may not understand is we are not the inhabitants, because the city of Virginia Beach is a corporation. It's got its own Dun & Bradstreet number. It is a for-profit corporation providing government services. That's what the city of Virginia Beach is. And probably your city, your county, your borough, your township, wherever you live, it's probably the same. If you look into it, you will discover probably something very close to what Virginia Beach is. And I happened to look in my charter in the city of Virginia Beach, and it's very interesting. At section 3.5.03 or 3.05, I don't remember, but it's the powers that are authorized to the city of Virginia Beach. And it reads something very similar to what the executive department in the Constitution reads. The city of Virginia Beach has no more power than the state itself. The state can't grant an entity power which it doesn't have. And also, the state cannot delegate its own powers to another entity. Like it can't delegate rulemaking or lawmaking power to another entity. It can't do it. Only the legislative branch is authorized to make general laws per our Constitution. That is the limit. And the General Assembly can't dictate that power to a municipality or a county or any general local subdivision. So, the ordinances that your local branch of government, wherever you live, whether it be city, town, county, they're all synonymous. It just depends on the size and what they're called. But I just say municipality to blanket cover all of them. But our city council here is headed by our mayor. And city council is the governing body for the city of Virginia Beach. They're the ones that make the ordinances. They are not laws for the general people. They are ordinances. And they only apply to the bureaus, the offices, the officers, the agents, the agencies that they've created and that they control. That's all their ordinances apply to. They don't apply to me. They don't apply to you, because the General Assembly cannot give power away that the people granted it. They can't delegate lawmaking ability to anyone else. No one in the state. So, your ordinances are not laws for the people. Now, if you go out and you get a business license through your city and you get authorized to conduct business or something of that sort, then there's the tie where they could have some sort of authority over you because you're exercising a privilege. It's not a privilege to live, breathe air, travel, grow food, sleep, conduct your affairs how you see fit, as long as you don't injure anybody or their property. There's no rulemaking that can abrogate any of that. These ordinances that they claim apply to the people don't apply to the people, because your local municipality was not granted that power. They only have power over the territories that they create and manage and the people that also work for them. Those are the only people your city can control. They can control all of your police officers, all your firemen, all your EMTs, all your code idiots that go out there trying to enforce codes on private property. That's happened to me before. Well, they don't have the authority to do that. So, say you're working on your car, right? You're in the middle of fixing it and you got it jacked up, you got a tire off in your driveway and you're doing something. This has happened to me several times. This is back before I learned any of this useful information. I got it. Some code idiot wrote me up for having an inoperable car, or motor vehicle he called it, which it's not even a motor vehicle, because that's another story. So I get this notice hung on my door, rubber band to my doorknob or something. I don't remember how I got it, saying, "Oh, I've got so much time to fix this, that it's against this ordinance." Well, I got it fixed in time anyway, because I was just in the process of doing that, so it wasn't a big deal. But then one day they emptied my trash. Trash day around here is every Wednesday. Set my trash can out. Well, I don't know what happened. It was windy that day. I don't know what happened. I was at work. The guy dumps the trash can. There's trash all over my front yard. When I say trash, like paper and just stuff from the garbage. Probably half the trash can went in the trash truck and the other half went on my lawn. So before I even got home from work that day, which I would normally, back then I got home kind of late, I probably would get home about 5 o'clock. 6 if I'm picking the kids up and doing a bunch of running around. Anyway, so lo and behold, I come home from work and there's this rolled up thing in my door handle, and sure enough, they got me for litter. For littering when the city's the one that did it. I'm getting a notice for it. Well, I didn't know what I know now about ordinances and the power that the city actually has, which they have no power over the people. I want you to understand that. If you don't have any contractual obligation with the city, then they have no authority over you. So, I got this thing, and it really pissed me off. I'm like, the city created this problem, and they're going to try to extort money from me for it when I got to go out and clean their mess up. That's another thing that pissed me off. I got to clean their mess up, and they're going to charge me for cleaning their mess up. So anyway, I got pretty pissed off, and I went and I looked, and I called them the next day. I just stewed on it for a day. And I called the city up, and I said, hey, what's this deal about trash on my property and you citing me for it? And they're like, what's your address? And I told them my street address. And they're like, oh, yeah. And he said, oh, it wasn't just you, it was your neighbor, too. Which I've got a neighbor who doesn't take care of his place. Actually, he doesn't even own it. He's just like squatting in it. I think he's a family member of the old folks that passed away next door. I miss them folks. But so he's over there now. He just lets his place run down. Kind of got all the neighbors not very happy with him. But come to find out, he also got one. And I said, well, then maybe it's a mistake because his yard is a mess. Mine is not. I said, the trash you're speaking about might have been the trash when they emptied my trash can and spilled half my trash on my front lawn that I had to clean up. I said, is that what you're talking about? He's like, well, I think this just applied to your neighbor. I think it was a mistake. You got that by accident and blah, 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 blah. And he made it go away. This was the boss. This was like the head property guy. Well, I never got any more ordinance violations after that, I don't think. But if you ever do, you can contest it. Their ordinances don't apply to you. They just simply don't have the reach to reach private property. They actually need a search warrant or an arrest warrant to even come on your property. That's because your property rights are immutable. If it's private property and you own it, you have control to the exclusion of all others of your property. In other words, government people can't just come on your property unless you give them permission. They just can't. Now, when you get services like water, electricity, sewer, whatever, you have to give them access. There's probably something in the service contract that you're giving them access to their stuff so they can do their things, which is a different story from like code enforcement idiot or law enforcement just coming up to your house and knocking on your door without a warrant. They're not allowed to do that unless you consent to it. Just tell them basically, get the hell off my property, you're trespassing. And if you come back, I'm gonna press charges on you. And the only thing they can do is get a lawful warrant. There's ways they could obtain a warrant, and if they have to do it properly. And here in Virginia, it can't be over 15 days old. If it's on the 16th day, that's an invalid warrant. It's got to be signed by a magistrate. It's got to be signed by the magistrate that made the decision that overseen the probable cause statement and determined, yes, there is probable cause to go on this private property. And that judge or magistrate is held accountable because his signature's on it. And if I get a copy of that warrant, somebody comes on my property making some kind of claim, and there's no justifiable reason, and he justified it, I can come after him personally. I can sue him and the officer personally. Whoever was involved in the creation of that warrant, if it wasn't done properly, they're liable. So keep that in mind too. People can't just walk on your property. If you're a property owner, you've got power. In fact, back in the founding of the country, only property owners could vote. I mean, that's how high regard owning property is. For you out there who do not own your own property, I suggest you invest in it. Because it's more than just property rights. It's a peace of mind. It's an investment. It's something you can pass down to your children or to your siblings or whatever. I mean, in America, property ownership is very important and should be a lot of esteem put behind that. So that's about inhabitants. A municipality needs inhabitants. Well, if you look up the word inhabitant in the Virginia Code, it's not defined. They use it all over the place, but it's not defined. But a government must have two things. It must have territory, and it must have inhabitants. to run the government. So that is what an inhabitant is in our Virginia state code. They refer to them as like agents or officers or agencies or whatever. Those are part of and the territory is the boundary line of the city. It's all marked out, metes and bounds of the city. So a government can't exist if it doesn't have both of those two things. So when the government talks about inhabitants, it's talking about their people, their employees, their contractors, their officers. That's what they're talking about. Members of the corporation. They're not talking about the people. The people are not referred to as inhabitants in the Virginia Code because we're not inhabitants. We are the people. We are men and women. You very rarely see those words. You don't see them at all in the Virginia State Code because they can't regulate us. So what they do is they come up with clever words like operator, driver, owner. They'll call us all kinds of things. Taxpayer. It doesn't mean that's what they are, but there are entities that are drivers, that are owners, that are operators, that are a licensee or whatever, that are all, operating under a privilege that the municipality granted them. Well, if you're not operating under a privilege, then you're not controllable. They have you have no situs, you have no nexus for the city to even dictate, or your municipality to even dictate what you can and can't do on your property. As long as you're not creating a hazard for somebody else with your property, then they could probably get involved if you decided, you want to put a hazmat storage facility on your property. Well, if somebody complained about it and they can prove that there's possible harm or that there is harm coming from that, they can force you to tear it down because you're causing a problem for one of the people. So it has to be adjudicated, has to be rectified. You can't just go around causing problems for people. It's just, everybody has equal rights. That's all part of this whole thing. It's the right of equal rights. Your rights are no more important than mine. Mine are no more important than yours. My say means no more than yours or my neighbor's. It has to be proven. So keep that in mind. I mentioned something about becoming a secured party creditor 4 years ago. I was looking into some of that stuff. That's when I was really starting to dive into this whole, I just want to be left alone, and I'm trying to learn how to be able to do that. Well, I had to educate myself a lot, and I went down a couple rabbit holes that are not beneficial. And one of those is thinking you can correct your status. Well, there is no status to correct because whatever you claim is what you are. If you claim to be a citizen of the United States, then you're a citizen of the United States. You fill out documents to support that. You show people that's what you are. If you're a citizen of the United States of America, then you're a citizen of the United States of America. If you claim to be a resident of some area, then you're a resident of some area and you will be treated as a resident. Or if you're a non-resident and you claim that's what you are, then you're going to be treated as a non-resident. It's really that simple. There's nothing to correct. The thing to remember is, how do you conduct your business? How do you conduct your affairs? That's what keeps you out of the public limelight and keeps you from being able to be controlled, because you're not exercising any privileges. If you're not exercising any privileges, you should be left the hell alone. Nobody should be bothering you. And they typically won't. So, I talked a little bit about my mortgage and about some of the problems I was having with taxes. Not problems, but questions. Well, this has been 4 years later. And you know what? The city of Virginia Beach cannot provide any answers to simple questions like, please provide me the tax return that I filed on my property. Well, they can't do it because you don't file a tax return on your private property. You don't file a return on your property unless you own a business. which again is exercising a privilege. Then, if you conduct a business that is authorized by your locality or your state, then you incur taxable obligations because you're conducting a privilege of running a business. If you have your property registered as that business address, then they can tax a portion of your property. And you would also get a homestead exemption because your whole entire property is not used for your business. A certain portion of it is, and the rest can't be taxed. Well, what about us folks that don't run a business off of our property? What if we just live here? We eat here, drink here, sleep here, and conduct monkey business here. Well, none of that is a privilege and none of it is taxable. But yet they tax every single one of us as if we're conducting a privilege to own and live in our home, and that is fraud. I haven't paid property tax in 4 years. Not on my cars, truck, motorcycles, nothing. House, nothing. Not one iota of tax. Do they still send me tax bills? Yep. And I make a copy of them and send them back with a letter saying, hey, basically making a records request. Show me the return I filed on my property in order for you to create an assessment. Or show me how you use the income strategy for an ad valorem tax. You have to figure out the value of what's happening on that property in order to even come up with an assessed value. You can't just look up houses around the area. What do they go for? Oh, we'll pick one in the middle and we'll charge him that's how much his property's worth. Well, so who cares what it's worth? It's not worth anything to them. They have no ownership or interest in it. They can't tax it. So I send them a request. Say, hey, and I tell them at the very bottom, hey, I'll pay this tax if you can show me that proof that it's valid, that it's a valid tax, that I want you to authenticate and validate this tax. They can't do it. I've asked them to send me all these documents. Nothing comes back with a signature on it. They have nothing. They send me these printouts from copies of my deed, which I already have. So anyway, the only reason I could even do this is because I paid my property off in August of 2021. I'll do a follow-up to what I was talking about on the video that I'm following up, and I was talking greatly about the fact that at the time I made that video, I still had a mortgage. And the mortgage company had gotten involved. This is after the video was already recorded. So let me tell you about this story. So, like I said in my last 4 years ago, I contacted the treasurer's office. They couldn't answer some simple basic questions I had, like, how do you know how much to charge me on taxes and how often? And they just couldn't answer it. Patched me through the Commissioner of Revenue. Commissioner of Revenue's office couldn't do it. They patched me through the city manager's office. City manager couldn't answer it. Or whoever I spoke to in that office. It wasn't the treasurer, it wasn't the Commissioner of Revenue, and it wasn't the city manager. It was somebody they had working as staff in their office. And they didn't know the answers. And they finally patched me through to an attorney, Dana Harmeyer, who said, this is the code that we're using to tax you with. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I needed to know. And I explained all this on my video. And I stayed up and I looked at the codes, started from where he talked about, and man, did it lead down some rabbit holes. So I ended up sending him a letter along later with the treasurer, V. Lee Henderson, and Dana Harmeyer, who is still the same city attorney that I've been working with for the last over 4 years now, trying to get some answers out of these clowns. And none of them can answer basic questions. I end up always going to the attorney because nobody else will answer anything. It's very frustrating. And you're going to find out, you go into your municipality and you start asking some basic questions, they're not going to know the answer. You're going to end up speaking to an attorney. I almost guarantee it. That's what they do. They can't answer it. They can't tell you why they're doing what they're doing because they were taught by the person that was there before them. They were taught by them, well, this is just how we do it. We just tax every square inch of land on the inside our imaginary boundary. Whether you're authorized to do it or not, that's what they do. So anyway, these people couldn't give me an answer. So I wrote them people a letter. They didn't answer my letter. I did get something back from the attorney. It's a bunch of case law that didn't even apply. It's all corporate taxation laws. I looked up every single one of them and read all of them. None of them applied. Case law wasn't even close to my situation. A private home, no business relation, no nothing. It's just a home I live in. So I wrote him back. We've been writing back and forth for the last 4 years. I actually met him twice. He wasn't real happy with me because I speak my mind and I know what the hell I'm talking about because I read. And I don't do anything unless I fully understand what I'm doing. I'm not just going to jump into something and not know. I'm going to research first and then figure out how I want to handle this. That all has to be, you have to figure out how you want to do that. Everybody's preferences are different. Some like the direct approach, which I like. Confront them directly and ask them questions. And when they can't answer you, then you start asking more. Well, why can't you answer that? Why don't you know how are you doing this if you don't know how you're doing? If you don't know where the authorization comes from, why are you doing it? I want to see the tax rolls. I want to see who signed the tax roll. Can I see who signed the tax roll? Which is Sue Cunningham, our assessor, who never communicated with me. I've sent her several certified mail. She never responded. The attorney, same clown, always responds. So I bar grieve him. He's probably gotten 7 or 8 bar grievances from me in the last 4 years. I don't know how he's still there, to be honest with you. But I wasn't as good at writing bar grievances then as I am now. But anyway, let me go back to my mortgage. So here's what happened with the mortgage company. I was financed through Rocket Mortgage. That was the last mortgage company I had. I had like 3 or 4 of them over the years. I refinanced when the interest rates went down. And like I said in my last video, I stupidly rolled some debt into the house, which I probably shouldn't have done. So I was facing the decisions. I decided after the city officials didn't answer any of my questions, didn't provide any of the correspondence I was asking for. They just obfuscate everything and mislead everything and just throw a bunch of crap at the wall and see what sticks. Well, nothing stuck because none of it made any sense. Obviously, they don't know the answers. So I stopped paying my taxes. This is before I paid my mortgage off. I stopped paying my taxes. And this is when I was really learning all this. That day I looked at my mortgage bill and I realized the tax I was paying. I was paying interest and tax. Just on interest and tax, I was paying $600 a month. That has nothing to do with the principal. That's just interest and tax. And I had a pretty low interest rate on the mortgage. So anyway, I called my mortgage company up. I said, hey, I want to take care of my own escrow account. I don't want that to go through you guys. I'll take care of my insurance and my taxes. I just want you to maintain, the payment. Just you take care of the principal and interest. I'll take care of the taxes and insurance. They said, oh, okay, fine. And they dropped the escrow. So I ended up making a one-time check out to my insurance company so I could just pay them for the year and have them done. So I wouldn't have to make payments every month like the mortgage company breaks it down. So I took care of that, got the insurance done. I'll talk a little bit about that too if I don't forget. And then I stopped paying the property taxes that used to be part of my mortgage note. Well, now it wasn't on there, so my mortgage payments went down quite a bit. One, I wasn't making a monthly installment towards my insurance, so that was a little bit cheaper every month. And then I wasn't paying all these taxes every month. I was paying like almost $200 a month just in taxes. Just in taxes. So that saved me. I still paid the same mortgage payment, but I was just paying more towards principal. I wanted to get it paid off. Well, lo and behold, the city of Virginia Beach, in its infinite resources and wisdom, contacts my mortgage company and tells them that I have an outstanding debt on property taxes. Well, guess who's really concerned about that? It's the mortgage company, because they have interest in this property. They have a secured interest in this property. because they basically own it. I'm just paying them off. Until it's paid off, they have an interest in it. So they're very concerned when somebody doesn't pay their taxes. The mortgage company doesn't know how taxes come about. They don't know about tax laws. They're finance people. They just want to make sure that a municipality isn't going to swoop in and put a lien on their property. They want to protect their investment. So I got a note from my mortgage company, a letter, saying that this taxing authority, the city of Virginia Beach, is making a claim that I owed a couple $1,000s at this time. I think it was like $2,400 by this point, because I hadn't been paying my taxes for a few months. And they and in their letter, the mortgage company said, well, what we're going to do is, if you don't make arrangements to have this paid within a certain amount of time, or make arrangements with them so they're not telling us that you have an outstanding tax debt, then we're going to roll this into your mortgage and pay it, and you're going to pay us with interest. And I'm like, well, how the hell can this happen? I'm reading through it, and I'm like, let me get my closing documents. I pulled out my closing documents. You know, it's a stack of crap that thick. Nobody ever reads it. So there, within that, I looked through everything. There was like 62 pages. A lot of it was fine print legal mumbo jumbo. Well, there was nowhere in there that said anything about taxes or obligation to pay property taxes. Nowhere in any of that paperwork. I stayed up all night reading that paper. You know, I mean, 62 pages, and a lot of it's like fine print, like lawyer print. It takes a while to go through all that. And really, you know, if I found a word I didn't understand, I'd have to look it up, make sure I understood exactly what this document is telling me. And I did understand it. It was pretty convoluted, and it kind of walked around a whole bunch of circles. But basically, it protects the mortgage company. But, well, my other video stopped on me. Not quite sure what happened. It's like 1.3 gigs. But anyway, so I was talking about taxes. Well, so the Rocket Mortgage told me what they're going to do. I stayed up all night, looked at the documents, realized there's nothing that I signed authorizing them to do that. So they can't do it. If I didn't authorize them to do it, they shouldn't be doing it. But what they told me, and I got through to not just somebody on the phone. I called the next day. I thought about this overnight, and I called them up. I actually recorded the phone call, and I ended up, after like the third or fourth person, I ended up talking to an executive out of Detroit, Michigan, which is where Rocket Mortgage is out of. So this is out of their main office, not some lady that answers the phone. This was an executive, a professional. And we had at least a 1-hour conversation. It was very interesting. I explained to her, I said, look, I'm not just doing this because I feel like doing it. I only stopped paying these taxes when I realized they were doing it. They were fraudulently applying a tax to property that is beyond the scope of taxation in this Commonwealth and in this city. She says, oh yeah? I said, yeah. Read through your Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution did the people give the local government power to tax their activities when their activities are not taxable. You know, if you operate a business out of your property, then yeah, you obtain a taxable situs or a taxable nexus or a tax liability because of that privilege. And I explained all this to her. I was deep into this. I said, you know, I asked her, I said, you know, do you own your own property? She says, yeah. I said, well, do you conduct any business on your property? She said, no, it's just where me, my husband, and my kids live. I'm like, yeah, well, same here. I said, it's probably going to be the exact same thing in Michigan. Look in your Constitution. Look at your section under taxation in your Constitution. You're going to find out your property, the tax laws can't touch you or your property for just existing. You have a right to own property. It says so in our Virginia Bill of Rights. I bet it does in the Michigan Bill of Rights. So she listened to it. She was really nice. She gave me her personal phone number. She said, in the end, here's the end of the conversation. She said, Rich, you really make a compelling argument. She said, it really makes a lot of sense. I'm probably going to look into that myself for here in Michigan. She said, it is very compelling. She said, I'm going to give you my personal phone number. She said, when you get this resolved, I want you to call me and tell me what happened. I said, okay. So I took her personal phone number, put it in my phone. And then she told me, she dropped the hammer. She said, look, I understand it's not in the closing documents anywhere, but let me tell you this. This is what we do. If people don't pay their taxes, we don't question the taxes. We don't question the taxing authority. That's not our job. We're finance people. We assume the taxing authority knows what they're doing. And if they're making a tax claim on property we have an interest in, we will make sure that that tax gets paid, and whoever owns the property, the lien holder, is going to be responsible for it. That's how we do it. I'm just telling you that's how we do it. I'm like, well, at least you're honest with me. I know what to expect. You're not, telling me you're not going to do it and then do it behind my back. I said, I certainly do appreciate that. I said, I got some things to think about. So I did have some things to think about, and I pondered and pondered and pondered. And finally, I decided I'm going to liquidate my 401k plan. That was going to be my little nest egg. It was a pretty hefty amount of money. And so I decided to get a 14-day payoff notice from the mortgage company. They sent it to me. I went to my credit union. I liquidated funds out of my 401k, which they took taxes out, by the way. That's another story. Got most of that back. And I paid my mortgage off. And I just got rid of the mortgage company that was going to go ahead and pay my taxes. I was not going to have them people pay my taxes and then charge me for doing it. I was not going to let that happen. The only way for me to do that, pay the damn house off. So that's what I did. So that's the end of that story. Now, I've still been getting tax bills about every 6 months on the property. They claim I owe about $13,000 worth of property tax. I would like them to try to validate or verify that that's an actual tax debt. They can't do it. I never filed any returns on my property for them to even come up with a figure to tax me on. But yet they do it. That's what they do. So, I already talked about the state codes, the state constitution. Well, let's go back. Let's talk about the state codes. I touched on that a little bit. Your legislative branch of your state is what is authorized to make, well, they call them laws loosely. Mine calls them the Virginia codes. They're also referred to as statutes. Some states refer to them as general statutes. Some of them refer to them general state statutes annotated. But it's everything that the legislature enacts and the governor signs into law. Okay, that is your statute, and it gets codified or codified. And it gets put into codes, your state code. And the reason they did that was to make it more convenient. So everything's broken down by section, like motor vehicles, taxation, franchises, all the different things, aviation, all this stuff that your General Assembly or your legislative branch can regulate. It says right in the Constitution what they can regulate. And if it don't say they can regulate it, then they can't be regulating it. They can regulate what they call taxpayers. They identify what taxpayer is. They identify what a person is, what a driver is, what a motor vehicle is, what an owner, what an operator is. They have their own definitions for these words. And you think it's you until you read the definition of it and realize that a person actually means a fiduciary, a business trust, local government, all these other legal entities that were created on paper. It doesn't mean me and you, that we weren't created on paper. We weren't created by the Constitution. We were created by the Creator that made all of this possible. The one Creator that made everything made us. So, codes don't apply in general to the people. Keep that in mind, and the more you read the codes, one thing I want to stress, because People must understand. The people need to understand this basic concept. It's two things I want people to study. I want you to go back and read your state code after you're done reading your Constitution to find out what the power of the legislature is, and your executive, and your judicial. Figure out what their powers are, because that'll also tell you their limitations. They're only given certain limited powers. So anyway, your legislature comes up with their own definitions of words, and they're not what you use them as every day. Like everybody thinks a motor vehicle, oh, that's your car, your truck. Well, look at the definition of what a motor vehicle is. I think you will be very surprised. I don't refer to mine as motor vehicles. I refer to them as automobiles, because that's not defined in statute. But everybody knows what an automobile is, or a car. A car is not defined either. Pickup truck is defined. Truck is defined. So it's an automobile. It's my property. It's whatever I want to call it. It's not what you call it. It's whatever I call it is mine. I'm the only one with any interest or ownership in this. So anyway, so your state codes apply to certain subjects. They don't apply to the people in general. So keep that in mind. Every time you read the word person, it doesn't always apply to you. In fact, probably very rarely does. Person refers to somebody that's exercising a privilege. Well, us traveling around in our car is not exercising a privilege. We're exercising a right, and you can't tax a right. We have the right to locomotion. The Supreme Court has said it over and over and over. What had happened was when the United States became mobile, off of horseback and buggy, and started having cars that people could afford, and more people were having cars, and then they were making trucks, and they expanded the interstate system, and the roads, the local roads, the interstate, all these different roads and everything. They were all funded by public money. This is not private money that went into this. This is money from the people that pay taxes. Every time you purchase something, you pay sales tax on it. Well, unless you're in a state like, I think, Florida and just a few others that don't have sales tax, but they have other ways they tax things. Virginia happens to have sales tax. So every time I buy a gallon of gas, I'm paying tax. Every time I buy an article of clothing, I'm paying tax. I go to the store, I pay tax on food. I get my car repaired, I pay tax on my repair parts for my cars. If you get it serviced at a mechanic, you pay tax there. You pay tax when you go to a restaurant. You pay tax on everything in a sales tax state. So that's what I mean when I say paying taxes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's income tax or it's property tax. It's sales tax. That affects everybody. If you're doing any business at all, you're going to pay sales tax. If you go to Walmart, you're going to pay tax. I'm not sure that's legal or lawful, but the government's got to fund itself somehow. And I don't mind paying a little bit. But I only want to pay what I'm required to pay. Not what I'm not required to pay. And not what they're requiring of me to do that they're not authorized to do. So keep that in mind too. So state codes apply specifically. So learn statutory construction. That should be right at the beginning of your state code. The rule of statutory construction. Read that. And also statutory interpretation. It explains to you how to interpret what you're reading, because you're not reading English. You're reading legalese. Most legislation is written by attorneys. Most of your legislatures are attorneys, practicing bar members. Some even have their offices at their attorney location, at their firm. I mean, they're brazen, so much for separation of power in state, or separation of powers in each state, which is the three branches of government is supposed to be distinct and separate. When you got a member of the legislative body who is a bar member of that state, the Virginia State Bar is an agency of the Supreme Court. Well, that makes the bar member an agent of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the head agency of the judicial branch of government. So how can you have a bar member sitting in the legislature and then all of a sudden he's also a member of the agent of the Supreme Court? That's not very much separation there. I don't think any legislature should allowed to be a bar member. I think if they want to be a legislature, they got to forfeit their bar card. Or don't take office, don't take the oath, because you're violating your oath by doing so. Separation of power doctrine means you cannot hold control over more than one branch or within one branch. You can only hold office in one branch, not two. Two is not separated. Anyway, so that's my rant on that. Talked a little bit about the this country, the founding of this country. It was founded shortly after the Revolutionary War, and the Constitution came about a little bit later. The states were already, we had the 17 colonies, 13 colonies, which Virginia was one of the originals. In fact, the Virginia Constitution was used heavily when drafting the federal Constitution in 1781. The federal government didn't exist until 1781. It was just the colonies. There were some colonies added, and now we've got 50. So, the 50 states equals the Republic. The Republic of the United States of America. It consists of the land and the people. The land and the people are sovereign. We weren't granted any authority or any power or any whatever by our government. That isn't how it works. A republic is what this is supposed to be run like, but it's not. It's being run like a democracy. Well, democracy is mob rule. You hear everybody on the news saying, oh, we got to protect this democracy, or we're defending this democracy, or we're exporting democracy. Well, export democracy all you want. Get it the hell out of this country. We might elect officials and pass laws using a democratic method. That's fine. That's a good way to pass laws and elect officials through a democratic process. But this is a republic. And the key difference between a republic and a democracy is ruled by 51%. Rules the other 49%. The majority rules. That's where they get the term mob rules. Well, the biggest mob makes the rules, right? Well, that's a democracy, and a democracy rots from within. It will not work very long because 49% of people are going to get pissed off when the 51% start running roughshod over them and dictating what they can and can't do. You're going to have a revolution and a meltdown eventually. Where in a republic is different. Every individual has their own individual rights. And those individuals have no more or no less rights than the next guy. That system will work until the people forget how to live in that system and stand there with their hand out wanting government handouts all the time. When a government handout is just redistribution of money. I don't want the government in business just figuring out how to distribute my money. Therefore, I'm going to pay them as little as possible. My income, what I trade for my labor is my business. I should spend it how I see fit, or save it, or invest it, whatever I want to do with it. It's not up to the government to decide how my money should be spent. So if you sit around with your hand out, wanting handouts from the government and expecting them, then they're going to have control. The government's going to have control over you. Is that what you want? That's what happens when you receive benefits and privileges. There's strings attached to benefits and privileges. Trust me. Where rights are concerned, the people's rights, which we have many of which aren't even listed in the Constitution. Your state constitution will probably tell you that too. Something to the effect that just because a right is not enumerated in this Constitution doesn't mean the people don't possess it. The Virginia Constitution comes right out and says that. So a republic is where everybody is equal. Your rights are just as important as my rights, and vice versa. And I don't have a right to not offend you. In other words, I don't care if you're offended by me as long as I haven't hurt you or damaged your property. You know, your feelings are not my concern. I don't care about your feelings. You can think however you want about what I do as long as I don't hurt you or your property or damage you in any way. Can't help feelings. I don't care if your feelings get hurt. That's your responsibility, not mine. Anyway, I was telling you about the pure water distilling plant that a tabletop distilling unit I bought. Yeah, that thing's still running fine. It's been running for over 4 years. It makes 3 liters at a pop. Takes about an hour to make a liter. It's all stainless steel. I think they come out of Iowa or Wyoming. I can't remember where they're out of. But they're made in the United States. There's a 10-year warranty on it. I've never had a single problem with it. It runs like a champ. Currently, there's 5 of us living in this house right now. My daughter, who just turned 21, she's here half the time with her boyfriend the other half the time. My grandson, my grandson's mother, and my grandson's mother's other son. And myself. That's 5 of us. So we drink a lot of water here. When I make stuff like spaghetti or I boil potatoes or whatever, all distilled water. And I noticed just when I first started drinking distilled water in 2018, I read a book on water and water supply and how it affects us and how fluoride gets in your pineal gland and starts corroding it. And it just made a lot of sense to me. So I stopped drinking tap water and started drinking a hell of a lot of distilled water. And when I first started this in 2018, it was like 60 cents a gallon. That's not too bad. 60 cents for a gallon of water? That's pretty affordable, actually. But it started going up. And like, 2 years later, it's like $1.20. It doubled. Every year, it's like doubling. Now it's like $2 a gallon now. So that thing's more than paid for itself already. And it's all stainless. It's not broken. I took it apart one time to blow all the dust off the cooling coils and everything, but that's all I've ever had to do with it. So I'd recommend getting your own distilling plant, your own distilling unit, and make your own distilled water. Just use tap water. It gets all the nasty crap out of it. It's perfectly usable. You're going to enjoy tap water or distilled. You're not going to be able to drink tap water after that. Even the spring water you get. And they all come in plastic jugs. I don't use plastic with anything. I use glass and stainless. Plastics, I'm trying to get rid of them. I'm only using cotton clothes. I'm trying not to buy packaged, processed garbage from the store. I want to try to get fresh if I can. I'm growing my own garden. Amanda's helping me a lot, though, grow it. She's probably done most of the work in it, to be honest with you. But anyway, registration. Yeah, I unregistered all of my cars back in 2019, my 2 motorcycles. Just surrendered them. Haven't been pulled over since. I bought plates online. They're no shit Ohio tags that are not registered to anything. This guy probably buys them from the local DMVs in different places. And so they're not registered to anything. There's no stickers on them. They're just Ohio tags running in Virginia Beach. I wanted to get Ohio because that's the state I was born in. I'm an Ohioan. Whatever state you're born in, that's what you are. No matter where you live, you're still where you came from. Plus, this is a big military town, so there's a lot of plates from different states all over this area. There's like 3 huge Navy bases. There's an Army base here. There's Air Force base here in the area. There's all kinds of stuff here. A lot of contractors coming and going all the time. So you see a lot of out-of-state plates here. So it's not a big deal. And then Ohio, Virginia cops aren't going to know Ohio law. So, they're not even going to bother to look at Ohio law. So they're not going to bother looking at my plates or anything. They're going to be probably a little puzzled when they go to run them and they don't come up as anything. One of the good things is I go up to Ohio all the time, getting ready to go up there on 3rd of July. 3 to 7 July, I'll be up there. But the funny thing is, like traveling, when you get a pay by plate and they take a picture of your plate and they send you a bill wherever that plate's registered to, well, I never get a bill. I never get a bill because those plates aren't registered to anything. It's going to come back as nothing. So, and really the people shouldn't be paying tolls anyways, because tolls are for businesses exercising privileges, not for people traveling. If there was one dime spent on a tollway, a bridge, an expressway, a turnpike, a tunnel, whatever, if there was one penny spent of public money, which means taxpayer money, then the people shouldn't have to pay to travel on it, because we've already purchased it. Our taxes are paying for the repair. Our taxes were paying for the construction. Our taxes are paying for the maintenance. Why the hell do we got to pay to use it? Thing is, we shouldn't. Anyway, but yeah, I haven't been hassled by the police. I don't pay registration hostage fees every couple years, which makes no sense anyway. Why would you have to keep re-registering your car over and over again and paying a registration fee and taxes and all this crap when you never sold your car in the first place? Wouldn't that be the only time you'd have to ever dick around with registration, is if you sold it or transferred it to somebody or whatever? In other words, why would you need to even mess with registration more than once if you're not transferring ownership? There's another extortion scheme, is getting you to register private property. So I unregistered all mine. I don't have a license either. The only problem I had with that was trying to rent a car. If you don't have a valid driver's license, they'll rent you the car. But when you drive out of their lot, they're going to want to see your driver's license, which happened to me in Arizona last year. And I got in the car, had that nice big Escalade, and we're all heading out, like 5 of us in there. I'd already paid for it. Coming out of the airport, I forget who it was through, Budget or Avis, I don't remember now. But I went to drive out. They said, I already had it. I was in it. I was heading out of the parking garage. Oh, let me see your license. Well, I had a license, but it's got void stamped on it. A hole stamped on it says void. And I handed it to them, and it hadn't expired. But since I surrendered it and they took it out of the system, they punched void in it and handed it back to me. I gave that to them like, oh, no, we can't take this. We can't accept this. You got to go. You got to go put the car back. I'm like, but I already paid for it. I said, how about if my son drives it? We have the same name. I'm a junior. He's the third. No, it's got to be the guy that purchased it. It's got to be the one driving it. You can't have anybody else driving it. I had to get out of the car. We had to Uber. We had to Uber back to our Airbnb where we were staying. Didn't have a vehicle the whole time, but fortunately there was family there that let us use a car, so wasn't a big deal. Anyway, this video is getting long. I'm going to sign out. Read your Constitution, read your state codes, understand who and what you are and where the power comes from. The power comes from the people. We gave a little bit of it to government to protect our rights. We didn't give them all power over us, just to protect our rights. That's all we need them for. Administer the business, provide the water, the sewage, whatever. Administer your people, administrate your business, make a little money on the way, but build things for the people. Take care of the people. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Not for them to lord over us and dictate what we can and can't do, especially when it concerns private property. That's where rights are stomped on all the time. Don't let them do it. I don't. It's been successful so far, and I hopefully have more videos to come. So y'all have a good day. Talk to you soon. Peace.